Hello everyone. I'm using a throwaway account right now, and I'm also on my phone, so don't mind the formatting. I, 32 female, have been married to my husband Noah, 33 male, for 3 years, and before we got married, we'd been together for 4 years. We met on a dating app and we connected instantly because we had very similar personalities and a lot of common interests. We went out on a few dates, and within a few months we decided that we were serious about this. We met each other's families 6 months into the relationship, and when he introduced me to his mother, 57 female, I realized that he was the son of an incredibly successful entrepreneur, and he'd never told me about it. He'd told me that his mother was a businesswoman, but nothing more. He also went by his father's surname, and even when he told me his mother's name, he used his father's surname with her name. But his mother used her maiden name for business, even though she was still married to my husband's father. So I couldn't figure anything out either. When I asked him why he'd never told me who exactly his mother was, he confessed that he used to do that in the past, but a lot of women only wanted to date him for his money, so he stopped revealing his mother's identity altogether. But he was serious about me, so he told me. I felt a little insulted that it had taken him 6 months to realize that I wasn't a gold digger. But I didn't make a big deal out of it because his reasoning seemed somewhat valid back then. That was probably the only hiccup as such that I'd had to face during the time we dated. But apart from that, we didn't have many fights and our relationship was quite smooth sailing. We were happily married up until a few months ago when my husband suddenly lost his job. My husband is an art teacher, and I'm a pediatrician in a well-known hospital. It goes without saying that I make a lot more than my husband does, but he always insisted on splitting the cost of living equally. We've kept our finances separate from one another, so money was never an issue, at least for me. If I covered the groceries for 1 month, then he'd pay the electricity bills. That's how we worked. We didn't have to pay rent either because we lived in a house that my mother-in-law had bought us as a wedding gift, and we led a comfortable life. Money was not something we ever needed to worry about. Sometimes I did wonder how my husband could afford to buy nice things for me, split the bills, and also buy himself gifts so often, all on an art teacher's salary, and even asked him about it. But he told me that the school pays him well and also that he's an investor in his mother's business. So even aside from whatever he makes from his teaching job, he also has an extra source of income. I thought that was a satisfactory explanation and didn't push much further because after all he seemed to be on good terms with his mother and he taught in a private school. So I knew he was paid well. And as long as we could afford the lifestyle we were used to, I didn't think there was anything wrong with him making money off of his mother's business, as long as he was doing it ethically, which he claimed that he did. It was only around a week ago that I got to know that he'd been lying about being an investor all along, and that he actually used to demand money from his mother every time he needed something. His mother had visited us one evening a few weeks back, and things seemed to be a little tense between them. I think I must have left the room for 15 minutes to answer a work-related call, and when I came back there was a full-blown shouting match happening in the living room. My husband was screaming about how my mother-in-law was being selfish, while she was yelling at him, accusing him of being spoiled, lazy, useless, and whatnot. I tried to control them, but instead of calming down, his mother told me that she was no longer going to support our lifestyle, and told me that she was sick of my husband asking her for exorbitant amounts of money so many times every month. She said that just because she had the money didn't mean that she had to give it all away, and that it was about time that my husband and I learned to manage our own money and live within our means instead of trying to lead an extravagant lifestyle when we couldn't afford it. I had no idea what she was talking about at the time and only got to know the truth after she left the house angrily and my husband confessed to taking money from his mother for all his expenses. And his mother believed that both of us were equally at fault because she didn't know that I'd been lied to as well. I was stunned at my husband's audacity, and we got into a huge fight over his finances, and I decided to leave him. I'd been a fool, never to look into his finances and trust him blindly, but I wasn't going to be a fool any longer. And I also knew that if I stayed, then my husband would start taking money from me instead of his mother, since she'd made it sufficiently clear that she was no longer willing to encourage his laziness and spoiled behavior and was cutting him off. He'd lied to me. He'd lied to his mother about the US needing the money when it was actually just him who wanted it. And worst of all, he'd even tried to defend his laziness and lies. I packed my stuff up that very night and went to a hotel nearby and have been living here ever since. I've been speaking to my friends, trying to find a lawyer, and have been ignoring all the messages from my husband. Yesterday, all of a sudden, I received a call from my mother-in-law, and it was very concerning because she told me that she was going to see me in court. I didn't understand what she was talking about and asked her to elaborate, but she refused to say anything else and hung up without another word. Obviously, I've been panicking ever since, and I tried to call her back several more times to find out why she'd said that, but she didn't answer. I thought about calling my husband to find out why she'd say something like that, but even he'd avoided me the entire day. This morning, finally, he responded to me and called me back. I asked him why his mother had said something like that, and he told me that his mother had said the same thing to him as well, and he was still trying to get through to his mother and find out the real reason as to why she'd said that. He also told me to come back so that we could deal with his problem together, but that's really not happening, and that led to another argument between us. After that phone call with him, I decided to call his mother again because I was afraid that the real reason his mother had threatened to take me to court was because she still believed that both her son and I were living off of her money, which simply wasn't true. I'm an independent woman, and like I said, we used to split the cost of living. Other than that, I paid for all my personal purchases and expenses, including little things like gas for my commute to work, my internal bills, and all that. I don't think I've ever asked my husband for money because luckily I never needed to, and I hope I won't need to in the future either. I'm not the one who was taking money from my mother-in-law, and my husband was definitely not taking it for my sake because all the money went into funding his lifestyle, not mine. So I decided to talk to my mother-in-law and tell her the truth, since it was obvious to me by then that my husband wouldn't. I tried to call her, but she didn't respond yet again. And so as a last resort, I texted her and told her everything. I explained to her that I had no idea what my husband had been up to and had always trusted him blindly. So I hadn't even tried to find out more about his source of income because his explanation about being an investor seemed good enough at the time. I also added that I was willing to cooperate and let her lawyer look through my bank statements and go through my financial accounts to confirm the same. And I was also okay with returning or selling off all the gifts that my husband had brought me so far with the money he'd taken from her. I was incredibly lucky that she hadn't blocked me and the messages went through to her. And almost an hour later, I was on a call with her and she was arranging a meeting. She sounded curt, but she said that she believed me and only wanted to let her lawyer have a go-through as a legal formality because she had no interest in going after me pointlessly and wasting my time and energy as well as her own. I was really relieved and agreed to meet her and her lawyer the next day after tomorrow because, like I said, I had nothing to hide and could even prove it. After all of that, I went to work as usual and tried not to think about any of this until, once again, I was forced to because my husband decided to call me at lunch. Out of habit, I accidentally answered instead of declining, and he started yelling at me immediately. He accused me of being ungrateful for the life that he provided for me so far, and said that now, just because his mother had left his side, I was finally showing him my true colors. And then he said, "You turned out to be a gold digger too then," which actually made my blood boil. I was already in a horrible situation, all thanks to him and his lies, and he had the audacity to accuse me of being a gold digger when the truth was that he didn't even have any gold that I could dig. It was his mom's gold. I lost my cool altogether and ended up screaming at him as soon as I exited the hospital, because I tried my best to be put together for long enough. I told him that not only had he lied to me for ages, but he'd also not even bothered to clear my name, which is why his mother was about to come after me. But now she knew the truth, and he'd be the only person liable to pay her back, and that's exactly what he deserved. He sounded really shocked when I told him that I told his mother the truth, and all of a sudden he started talking about how we were meant to be a team and that it was totally unfair that I was suddenly pretending not to be equally involved in this when for the past couple of years I'd only been able to enjoy this lifestyle because of him. He said that we were in this together, and no matter how hard I tried to deny it, I wouldn't be able to pretend I wasn't guilty for long, and then disconnected the call. It's been a few hours since then, and even though I came back home midway after lunch because I literally felt sick to my stomach, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what my husband said because there's some truth in it. I don't want to admit it, but maybe that's what this is all about. I feel like I would have tried harder to find out the truth about his source of income if we'd had any financial problems. But even though I'd been content with our nice life, and so I didn't bother to question anything. I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, and now I just don't know what to think of either myself or my husband. AITA for throwing my husband under the bus? Update 1. Hello, I'm back after almost 3 days, and before I get to what happened, I want to thank everyone who took time out to thank me. I'm a lot more stable now and feel much better about what I did, and the comments here helped as well. It was nice to see that most of you thought I wasn't the one at fault here, and that really helped me make sense of things. I think my husband was just trying to gaslight me into feeling guilty about something that I wasn't even responsible for. Of course, I should have been more aware of his finances, but we've never really been the kind of couple to get involved in money matters unless it was absolutely required, and mostly just kept that aspect of our lives to ourselves. I think that's because he always had too much and wanted to hide it, and I never had enough growing up and wanted to hide that part of my life, so we just ended up never talking about it openly. I am kind of relieved that we kept our finances separate though, because now that's what saved me from facing a lawsuit from his mother who's going to sue me. I thought he'd just been taking money from her, but in fact this ran much deeper than that. He tried to borrow money from his mother to buy a sports car a few weeks ago, but she'd put her foot down because even though she had the money, she believed that he, being a 30-something man, asking his mommy for money every time he wanted something was nothing short of embarrassing, and said no. So he decided to ask one of her business associates for a loan, and even told him that he himself was being made a partner in the company and would repay the amount back to him soon enough. Of course, that guy wasn't stupid enough to buy any of my soon-to-be ex-husband's crap, and decided to tell his mother what he tried to pull, and that was that. I met his mother for lunch yesterday and had her lawyer go through my accounts to confirm if I was telling the truth, and that's how I found out about all of this. I don't know what grounds she's going to sue him on, and I didn't think it was appropriate to ask, but I'm sure she's clever enough to find out a way. If a woman is brave enough to sue her own son, then I'm sure she knows what she's doing. I'm just glad that I was able to get out of this and clear my name from this mess in the nick of time before the situation got even more messy. My husband's been trying to get through to me, but I think I'm going to block him now. I finalized a divorce lawyer, and he happens to be a good friend of my dad, so I'm sorted on that front as well, and I'm hoping that the process is smooth. Let's just pray that my husband isn't stupid enough to contest it. I don't think he will, though, because then where will he find the money to fight a long legal battle anyway, now that his mom's out of his life? Update 2. I filed for divorce today, and my husband is going to be served in a few days. It was just so freeing, and I can't believe that I finally did it. Incidentally, my soon-to-be ex-husband also texted me today from a different number because I'd blocked the previous one. He was smart enough not to call me, because then I'd just block him instantly, and then he'd lose the chance to say what he had to say. And what he had to say was so incredibly stupid. I wish I could have pre-blocked this number somehow. He said that he knew I was going to file for divorce just because his mother was cutting him off, and that I'd been with him for the money all along. He now wanted me to tell his mother that he'd used the money for the US and not just himself, so that she would go easy on him and maybe even forgive him. Why? Because I owed to him somehow. I don't know why he thought that I would help him out after he lied to his own mother and me for so long. I definitely do not owe him anything. He genuinely still believes that he stands a chance, and it's honestly insane how delusional and pathetic this man is. I can't believe I was in love with him for so many years and failed to realize what he really was. But it's okay now. I blocked his number again, and I highly doubt he'll go to the trouble of getting another number to text me yet again after being rejected outright. Even if he does, it doesn't matter, because I know I'm going to just keep blocking him again and again. And if it gets too bad, then I'll just file for a restraining order against him, and I don't think any court is going to deny me that after knowing what he's put me through. Update 3. It's been a week since I filed for divorce, and yesterday my husband was finally served with the papers. I know that because yesterday he showed up at the freaking hospital in the middle of the day and started throwing a tantrum in the lobby when the receptionist refused to let him in to see me because I was with a patient. When I was done with that appointment, I actually had to put the rest on hold so that I could speak to my husband and force him to leave. I told him politely to leave me alone when I saw him, but he said that he wouldn't go unless I promised to stop the divorce proceedings. I even said that I would, although I didn't mean it, just to get him to go away, but he still didn't. And then I finally had to ask our receptionist to have security throw him out. The only reason they even let him stay for that long was because they knew he was my husband. But I was too embarrassed and ashamed to be associated with the kicking and screaming man who was being escorted out by security. I also made sure to tell them to call the cops and have him arrested. I wanted to press charges, but my coworker told me to do it outside of the hospital because doing it at work would definitely not sit right with management. I was livid that he'd actually shown up at my place of work, and I knew that I had to do something to prevent this from happening again in the course of the divorce. So I called my lawyer up and decided to file that restraining order that I'd been considering anyway. My job is not the easiest, and I'm under a lot of stress as it is, so I absolutely cannot have this nonsense happening to me every other day, and he needs to realize that. I also needed to do something more effective that would make him realize instantly that he couldn't mess with me anymore, because the restraining order would also take time to be processed. My first thought was to call his mom and tell her, but she's already cutting him off. I hardly think she wants anything to do with him anymore. So I decided to go the traditional way and spoke to one of my bulkier friends who goes to the gym regularly and lifts weights, so he's very well built and could easily beat up my husband in a fight. I didn't know what else to do, but I wanted to intimidate my husband into staying away, and I wanted it to happen right away. So I told my friend whatever was happening, and he was nice enough to agree to help me out, even though in real life he's one of the sweetest and most gentle people I know. He was willing to play the villain for my sake, and that was really nice of him. And no, he's not doing it to hit on me. He's not into women. So after work hours, I decided to drive to my husband's house, my old house with my friend. It was kind of embarrassing and I felt really stupid, but I knew I had to power through it and let him know that he wasn't allowed to push me around. When he opened the door, he seemed shocked to see me with my friend. Once he recovered from the shock, he then went back to his usual demeanor and asked me what point exactly was I trying to prove by divorcing him. He then told me that I wasn't allowed to file for divorce after I'd spent so many years living off of his and his mother's money, which again is just not true, and I really don't know why he keeps saying that again and again. Lucky for me, my friend was just as enraged as I was at that moment, and he stepped in before I even said anything. He got all up in my husband's face and told him that he knew about the way he'd been harassing me, and it was bad enough that he was accusing me of things that were not even true, but he'd made a huge mistake by showing up at my workplace and humiliating me there. My soon-to-be ex-husband was trying really hard to put on a brave face and stand his ground, but I could see that he was slowly stepping back inside the house as my friend towered over him. My husband is not a well-built guy, and he's 5'7", while my friend is a whopping 200 pounds and is 6'2", so it's not difficult to imagine how screwed my husband was feeling at that moment. But somehow he still worked up the courage to tell my friend to stay out of this, as it was personal. So I told my husband that he should have remembered that before showing up at the hospital. If it wasn't personal then it wasn't too personal now either. I told him that I'd already filed for divorce, but now he'd force me to file for a restraining order as well. And I also let him know that the only reason I didn't call the cops on him at the hospital was because I didn't want trouble at my workplace. But now, if he ever showed up anywhere near me, he'd have hell to pay, and I'd make sure of it. He looked like he was desperate to argue, but my friend was standing right there, so he didn't say anything. And I came back to the hotel. He hasn't tried to get in touch with me since, and I'm guessing that I was able to scare him enough. I've also started looking for an apartment because I don't want to live in a hotel anymore, and with any luck, I'll find one soon. Here's to the future, I guess. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.